Have you ever thought about what it would be like if a single chapter of a sacred text acted like a whole constitution for a community? Well, that's pretty much what we're diving into with the fifth chapter of the Quran. It's called Surah Al-Ma'idah, or the Table. It's this incredibly dense and fascinating text, just packed with laws, stories, and really profound statements about what it takes to build a society on a foundation of faith.
Now, to really get to the heart of this chapter, we need to start with this one central question. What does it truly mean to make a sacred promise? Because at its very core, this chapter is all about covenants, those sacred agreements between the divine and humanity, and just as importantly, between people themselves.
So why is it called the table? It's a great question. The name actually comes from this really dramatic story that shows up near the end of the chapter. Jesus' disciples ask for a miraculous table, an Al-Ma'idah, to be sent down from heaven as a powerful sign. This moment, this test of faith, is so significant that it gives the entire chapter its name.
And that idea of a test, of a promise, brings us right to our first big theme. You see, this isn't just a chapter that happens to have a covenant in it. It's really framed as the chapter of covenants. It's all about defining the very essence of what a sacred promise is.
And it doesn't waste a single second. I mean, the very first verse is a direct command. It just lays it all out there, setting the tone for everything that's about to follow. This isn't just a friendly suggestion, it's the absolute foundation the community is supposed to be built on.
And this theme just keeps coming back. It's not a one-off mention. A few verses later, in verse 7, it calls on believers to remember their pledge to hear and obey. So it's making it clear that this covenant is an active, binding agreement. But, how does an abstract promise like that actually translate into daily life? Well, the chapter is about to show us.
So the chapter then makes this really interesting shift. It moves from this abstract idea of a promise to the concrete, specific laws that give it shape. It's basically providing a blueprint for how a community of faith should work, day in and day out.
And the level of detail here is pretty striking. Verse 3 gets into some very specific dietary laws. And this isn't just about what's for dinner, right? It's about defining a community through these shared practices, showing that devotion extends to something as basic as the food on your plate.
It's the exact same thing with spiritual practice. Verse 6 breaks down the steps for Wudu, which is the ritual washing you do before prayer. It's another perfect example of a physical act that signifies a spiritual state, this feeling of purity and of being ready to communicate with the divine.
All of this highlights the really clear moral framework the chapter is setting up. It's a series of balances, It's a call to stick to justice, even when you're dealing with your enemies, and to work together on good things, but to never cooperate in sin. It's a super clear guide for ethical behavior.
And right in the middle of this whole section on law is one of the most significant verses in the entire Quran. This statement is widely understood as a declaration that the religious message is now complete, a kind of culmination of all the laws and all the guidance that's been revealed.
Okay, so after laying out all those laws, the chapter switches gears and turns to storytelling. It starts using these powerful events from the past as case studies in morality, in faith, and, importantly, in the consequences of breaking a sacred promise.
One of the most famous stories it tells is about Adam's two sons. Though, fun fact, they're not actually named in the text. It's this really primal story about jealousy, righteousness, and the very first murder.
The dialogue here is just incredibly stark. One brother, his sacrifice was rejected, and he's just consumed by envy. But the other one, he doesn't respond with a threat. He responds with a statement of faith. He says true worth is in piety, and that's something his brother can never take from him.
And the lesson, the moral that's drawn from this one single act of violence is just monumental. The text uses this story to declare the absolute sanctity of a single human life. The weight of killing one person is compared to killing all of humanity. And saving one is like saving everyone. It's just a profoundly powerful ethical statement.
So from that universal human story of Adam's sons, the chapter then broadens its scope to talk to specific communities of faith. It actually speaks directly to those it calls the people of the book, which means Jews and Christians.
The text actually acknowledges the revelations that came before Islam. It calls on the Jewish community to judge by the Torah and for the Christian community to judge by the gospel. It basically affirms their scriptures as valid sources of divine law for their own communities.
So, you might be wondering, how does the text explain this religious diversity? Well, this verse offers a really fascinating perspective.
It presents the existence of different faiths not as some kind of accident, but as a divine test. The goal isn't to erase the differences, but for each community to compete in righteousness. What a concept!
But at the same time, the chapter also sets some really clear social boundaries. Verse 57, for instance, advises believers against forming alliances with people who openly mock their faith. So this creates a pretty nuanced message, right? There's respect for other scriptures, but it's coupled with a pragmatic call to protect the community's own integrity.
Now, as the chapter starts to draw to a close, it comes full circle, back to its central theme of commitment, but this time it's on a cosmic scale. It's focused on the ultimate theological truth and on our final accountability. The final message circles back to the most fundamental principle of all, symbolized by the number 1, pure monotheism. The text just repeatedly hammers home the oneness of God as the absolute core of the covenant. Ultimately, all the laws, all the stories, all the guidance, it's all built on this one singular foundational belief.
And for its grand finale, the chapter presents this incredibly powerful scene from the Day of Judgment. It's a conversation between God and Jesus, and it serves as the ultimate clarification of what a prophet's mission is all about.
In this dialogue, Jesus confirms that his message was one of pure submission to the one God, his Lord and their Lord. This final scene just powerfully reinforces the chapter's relentless focus on monotheism and the true nature of that covenant between God and his messengers. So, Surah Al-Ma'idah, the table, is so much more than just a collection of verses. It's a blueprint for a community. It shows how a society can be built on a sacred promise, defined by its daily practices, its moral tales, and its core beliefs. And that leaves us with a final question to think about. What are the covenants, the stories, and the laws that define the communities that we belong to today?